Blended Podcasts. Brought to you by Blended Audio.
What does a healthy, balanced lifestyle consist of? How should you eat? What exercise should you be doing? How many hours of sleep do we really need? Does too much water flush away all your vitamins? Should it be high carb, low fat, or high fat, low carb? The more research you do, the more confusing it gets, because there is so much information out there, and there are so many conflicting opinions. So how are we supposed to know? Stick around to explore the different approaches to health with us, physically, mentally, and emotionally, and let's try to figure out together what the heck being healthy really means. I am your host, Hazel Priscilla, and this is your weekly dose of Feed Me Honesty. Hello again and welcome back. If you missed last week's episode for some reason, be sure to listen to that first, because today I will continue the discussion I had with dietitian Janke Wessels last week regarding plant-based diets. Just a quick recap. Following a plant-based diet basically means you're not eating meat or you're excluding all animal products like dairy and eggs if you go the vegan route. We talked about hitting your protein targets on a plant-based diet and came to the conclusion that although consuming about 100 grams of meat 4 times a week is ideal, you can still get enough protein on a plant-based diet if you eat a wide variety of protein sources, like beans and lentils, etc. Although Janke believes that supplementation is not necessary if you're following a balanced diet, she does recommend considering a supplementation or two when you decide to cut out meat and or dairy. You are welcome to contact Janke at wesselsjanke@gmail.com if you feel you can do with professional assistance. That is WESSELSJANKE@gmail.com. Okay, moving on. Janke, it's such a pleasure to have you back. I don't have children myself, but I know that you have 2 of your own, and I was wondering how healthy following a plant-based diet is when you're a child who is still developing. If you as a parent choose to feed your children a plant-based diet, is this, in your opinion, a responsible decision? Not only from a health perspective, but also from a social and food relationship perspective.
I should have seen this question coming because I have children. But I would say it's my opinion. I'm just going to go with my opinion on this question. But I would say if parents or caregivers are following a plant-based diet, maybe really think it through and look at all the risk factors, and maybe, just maybe, let the children decide later in their life for themselves what type of eating pattern they want to follow. And with children, we are concerned about many health-related issues. Yes, nutrient intake. I'm not even going to touch on that, because we all know children, they grow and they develop and they really have increased needs, especially during certain periods of their life. But also on an allergy level, it's we must just remember that all of our allergies, food allergies, it comes from amino acids, which we now know we find it in proteins. And we actually are advised to introduce children from a very young age to most of these amino acids, that we can actually decrease their risk to develop an allergy later in life. And part of this list, it's cow's milk and eggs, and also fish. So we want to introduce children to these foods, preferably before they turn 1 or before 1 year. And just to exclude this food from their diet, on that point of view, we can actually increase their risk to develop an allergy later in life. But I can say out of experience also, we don't want to deprive our children from food, and to just take this huge amount of food out of their diet. I also see that children are not always so fond of plant proteins. Yes, the important thing for me here is we want to introduce plant and animal proteins to children. It's really advisable and it's really beneficial. But I also see that children tend to not like seeds and nuts and beans and lentils and soya products as much as they will rather prefer something like milk or yogurt or cheese or egg or fish. So we must take that also into consideration, because children don't have the knowledge to know that I must eat this because I need to take in enough proteins. They are not grown-ups. So it might be very difficult to meet their protein needs through only plant sources. And then I think socially, I think even for an adult that follows a vegan or a plant-based diet, it might be a challenge to meet your social needs in a way, because when you meet up with friends or you invite someone over or you go out to a restaurant, people don't always consider you or cater for you, and it might be a challenge even for adults on a social level. And we don't want our children to also feel like an outsider in terms of food. We want to make them part of the group, and we want them to feel part of the group when it comes to eating, because that's very important. I think you actually mentioned it indirectly with social and food relationships, because we don't want to put our children on the outcast and to feel like an outsider, and they look at the lunchbox and it looks so much different than their friend's lunchbox. We want them to have some yogurt in it and cheese and maybe a bit of meat. And I think earlier on we also said it that I think from a food relationship point of view, maybe just think about it. If you deprive your child and you may be very strict on it, that they can't have this and they can't eat it from a very young age, you might trigger them to have not a healthy relationship with food. And we don't want children to have emotional relationship with food, because then we have emotional eaters. We want them to see food as something that they can enjoy. Yes, they must enjoy it within limits, and they must look at the healthy options, but we don't want them to have a fear for food or to feel that food is the enemy. So I'm not going to go with a yes or a no, but I just think that we must really just think it through and not just make a decision on, especially for our very, very young children.
I also think of birthday parties, for example. I know I would personally never want to send my child to a friend's party and tell them that they can't eat the cake. That being said, there are valid concerns around the quality of the meat that is available to us these days due to the high consumption that current meat industries have to keep up with. In order to keep supplying us with meat and dairy products, animals are pumped with all sorts of hormones to stimulate growth, and the fear is that manipulating growth hormones could increase IGF, or insulin-like growth factor, which could mimic the effects of human growth hormone in harmful ways. Janke, my question is, if we are advised by dietitians to include meat and dairy in our diets for optimum health, is it safe for us to buy these products from our local grocery stores, or what can be said about sourcing your meat from local farms or markets where you know the animals are grass-fed, or about rather buying free-range eggs, for example? And along with that question, how doable is this? Do we have easy access to what some people like to call ethical meat? And if we do, how will it affect our budgets?
I don't think this is an easy question, but one thing that I would just like to state here is I'm not an expert when it comes to agricultural issues. I'm not very familiar with the Department of Agriculture and how they operate in South Africa and how they implement regulations, and also how they regulate things in South Africa, specifically related to food products. What I do know, and it's maybe just more towards the statistics, but I think it's important to mention it here, that we must remember that globally and also in South Africa, we sit with a very, very big demand. Global food production is the single largest driver of environmental degradation and climate instability. And at the same time, unhealthy diets are now the leading risk factor for diseases such as diabetes, cancer, and heart disease. And I mean, we sit globally with a problem where we have 2 billion adults that are overweight and obese, and therefore they are at risk of developing these conditions that I just mentioned. And in contrast, we see that we have over 820 million people that go hungry every day. And on top of that, tons of food go to waste daily. And I don't know if you, but the statistics, it freaks me out. It's really scary. And I mean, this poor planet, it's burdened to feed an increasing global population that includes individuals who are starving to death and others who are basically eating themselves to death. So it's a difficult situation, and the experts actually say it's going to become more difficult. It's not going to become easier in the future. And yes, there is a public concern over the safety of South African meat products, which might contain hormones, and some of the health problems that we know of is low sperm counts in men and boys developing breasts and early onset of puberty in girls. But we must also remember that this practice of growth hormone that's added actually to the diet of the livestock, it's not a new practice. It's been in South Africa for decades, and it's known to be quite a safe practice. We are faced also, on top of that, we must remember that in South Africa we're also faced with very difficult farming conditions. And in most cases, most farmers, they will do anything possible to maximize the efficiency of their agricultural industry on their farm. And hopefully, I still believe in human kindness, these practices are still safe for humans and animals, and we do still believe that it's regulated. But on top of that, yes, hormones in food, we find it everywhere. And it's included in a wide variety of food, and we actually call them phytohormones when it's a type of a hormone that we find in vegetable sources. And when you take 1 tin of beer, it will actually provide you with more sex hormones than 500 grams of steak. But it's still not enough to produce any physiological effects in the human. And yeah, it's like I say, some sources, I'm referring now to the literature, will really refer that it's a safe practice, but then you will also get sources that say it's unsafe. But it's not a new thing to manipulate meat with hormones. With the manipulation of meat with hormones, it actually assists also to increase the muscle mass and decrease the fat mass in these animals, which is, if you think about it, it's beneficial in terms of the nutrient content of the meat, which is then of a lower fat content. But yes, I think I've said a mouthful now, but for me, this is very important, that we must remember there's really a huge demand, and it's not going to just go away. It's going to become more of a challenge in the future. And yes, we do get free-range eggs, we do get natural or organic meat, and it's an option if you are willing to pay more, because we will then have to pay more and it's going to affect your budget. It also then depends on the amount of meat that you will eat. But we must remember, the moment something is organic, it must be regulated if it's on the label. At least we do know that. And you will pay more, but it's understandable. I mean, this farmer is faced with a lot of, diseases or even death amongst the livestock. And also, it takes a much longer period of time for this livestock to reach an age or actually a weight to be slaughtered. So it makes sense that it will be more costly. And it's also a very small percentage of South Africans, I think globally also, that can afford this. And that's also one of the factors that it's quite costly. But for me, and I think it's my all-time favorite word, it's balance. I think if we focus on the prudent, balanced diet, and you don't have overconsumption of meat, you keep it within the limits, I don't see that it's so dangerous. I think it comes down to balance and also choice. Do you then go for just a normal meat, or do you go for the organic meat? I think it's your choice. It's according to your budget. But I don't see that it's totally unsafe to just eat normal meat. And on top of that, we must also look at the quality of the meat. I mean, and the cuts, and a bit further on the preparation methods. In what way do you prepare these meat? And all of that will add, for me, from a dietetic point of view, to at the end of the day, to the nutrient content of this meat. So yes, I would just say, for the general population, I mean, most of us, especially in the more upper income class, we do consume too much meat. We can decrease the meat intake, but I don't want to advise someone just to exclude meat from the diet, because it's still a great source of protein and actually a great source of nutrients. So for me, it's my answer, my very short answer will be balance. That will be my short answer.
And to tie in with that question, when it comes to food production, the use of pesticides on crops is also a health concern that can be addressed. Using pesticides may be necessary to ensure that crops grow, but it often leads to pesticide residues in fruits and vegetables after they have been harvested. And these pesticide residues have toxic effects on humans. It can interfere with our reproductive systems and fetal development, and it can also cause cancer and asthma. Is this something we should keep in mind when buying fruit and vegetables? Is it okay to buy fruit and vegetables from our big known grocery stores, or should we rather try to stick to buying organic fruit and vegetables at markets, for example, or even try to grow our own crops if we are fortunate enough to have the time and space?
Well, when it comes to food, there are always lots of concerns, and actually any kind of food. But once again, I would like to say that I'm not an expert in this field, but according to the literature that I am aware of, even though fruit and vegetables are genetically modified, it is quite safe and still safe for human consumption, but I stand corrected. We must also remember that the industry of fruit and vegetables, it's difficult, it's challenging, because we as the public, we request fresh fruit and vegetables, but it must also be of a very good quality, high quality. So we want these fruit and vegetables to last for a long time. And that's what people insist on. I know last year around about this time, we in South Africa, we experienced a very dry season, and I actually visited a supermarket in South Africa where they put up a sign to say, please excuse the poor quality of our fruit and vegetables currently, but we support our local farmers. And I didn't really have a problem with that, even though I had this little thought of, you pay for this and it's not good quality and it's not going to last for a long time. So I think, and the moment we want food that's perfectly shaped and that's really of a good quality, that's going to last for a long time, it's most likely genetically modified. And we all know that the moment, if you ever had grown your own vegetables in your own garden, you will know that it's not even close to perfect. But for me, as a dietitian, I do advise and actually encourage patients of all income groups. It doesn't matter of your socioeconomic status. I do advise patients to grow your own vegetable garden for many reasons, not just food security, but reasons beyond that. But out of experience, I can also say that it's not always so easy to grow your own vegetable garden with success. And it might be cheaper to buy from a local supermarket, especially vegetables, than to maintain and grow your own vegetables. And then also it becomes challenging to sustain a whole household out of one vegetable garden, especially if you are a bit limited on space. So for me, this question comes down to choice, or actually this answer of me, I think it comes down to your choice. Do you choose high quality food that will last longer, and maybe it will also most likely lead to less food wastage in your family? And yes, then you have the increased intake of some pesticides or hormones because it's genetically modified, or do you choose the natural route that you maybe grow yourself, but you might be limited on your variety of fruit and vegetables, maybe even limited on your intake of fruit and vegetables, and it also might lead to an increase in food wastage. So that's just my thoughts on this. Like I said, I'm not an expert, but I think it comes down to choice and what is your availability. And do you have options in your area? And if you can support local farmers, yes, I think that is for surely advised for many reasons, but not all of us have access to that either.
A while ago, I read in one of the Women's Health editions that people who identify as Flexitarians might just be the healthiest group of people. Flexitarians are basically people who mainly follow a plant-based diet, but still occasionally include meat. This means they get all the benefits of eating a lot of fruit and vegetables, but they also don't miss out on the benefits related to consuming a little meat every now and then. Let's say, for example, they eat meat once a day, 4 days a week, which is only a third of what someone eats who eats meat twice a day, 7 days a week. Can you agree with this statement? Is this basically what we are concluding from all our research and knowledge, or does it depend on the individual?
Yes, I think I do agree with this statement. I would like to refer to recently a group of experts called the Eat Lancet Commission on Healthy Diets from Sustainable Food Systems. And they recently published the Eat Lancet report. And this is really a very good reference guide for anyone interested in sustainable eating for humans, but also for the planet. So these guidelines, they are actually referred as a global reference diet for adults in order to obtain and also maintain health for humans and the planet. And it's called the planetary diet, or actually the planetary health diet. And this diet provides a flexible guideline that can be adapted, for individual dietary needs, personal preferences, things like cultural traditions. It's considered, while it still promotes health and also well-being. And according to this planetary diet, it recommends the intake of about 125 grams of plant proteins and nuts per day. And in addition, the intake of animal protein should be limited to 500 grams per week, more or less, what we also referred to earlier on. So in practical terms, a person will not be able to eat animal proteins on a daily basis, and not with every meal. So like you mentioned, it will only be maybe 4 days a week instead of every day. And I don't know, but I think this Eat Lancet report might just save the planet, because it's really a very, very good guide. And like I said, there has been a lot of thought and effort put into this report. Personally, I do believe that a flexitarian might just be as close as possible to optimal nutritional status, because they still enjoy meat and dairy, but at the same time they increase the intake of plant proteins and hopefully also whole grains and fruit and vegetables. So yes, it is a choice. But for me, a flexitarian eating pattern, it's a more sustainable way of eating. It's a bit more doable, looking at grocery shopping, social life, like we also discussed, and even family demographics, where you can sit with a family where there might be big age gaps and lots of differences in nutritional needs. And it might be just easier to meet everyone's needs through a flexitarian eating plan.
Janke, once again, thank you so much for chatting to us today. I think we have all learned a lot from you. I know I certainly have, and you've left us with a lot of food for thought, no pun intended. We will definitely be in touch with you again shortly.
I would like to thank you, and it was really lovely to spend some time with you today and also to try and answer your questions. I hope to hear from you also in the future again. Goodbye.
Tune in next week when myself and fellow podcast host Massimo Meneghetti explore the different approaches to healthy sleep. Have a balanced week and remember to be kind to yourself so that you can be kind to others too. Feed Me Honesty is a South African lifestyle podcast hosted by Hazel Priscilla and produced with the generous assistance of Blended Podcasts, brought to you by Blended Audio.